Hello, in this screencast we're going to go through the process of trending a two-channel EEG. This happens to be from a Massimo SedLine, but there are other systems that record two-channel EEG as well, and all have some unique properties. I'm going to go ahead and open the recording just by dragging it onto the desktop of the Persyst application, and I'm going to select EDF90. There's a couple of flavors shown. That's one way to open recordings when you know the file type, and in this case EDF. You can also click the open button and select the file type and open it this way as well. Now the first thing to note is I've got the recorded montage selected. The default montage in Persyst is the bipolar longitudinal A. That's a 1020 AP bipolar montage, and since none of those channel pairs exist in this, the screen is blank. So if I go to recorded, these show up. And note the labeling, L1, R1, L2, R2, and in parentheses we have the 1020 positions. So they're not recognized as 1020 labels. That's okay, we're not going to be doing electrode artifact identification and removal because we don't have enough channels to do that. Same thing for muscle, eye blink, lateral eye movement. We're not going to be using artifact reduction for this because we don't have that many channels, but we can certainly do trending with it. The other thing we're not going to be using in this case is the electrode signal quality and the numeric panel, but we don't have any comments here. We can leave that open. If we want to place comments, we can see those. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to do is create some montages for this, because the recorded montage is a hard-coded montage in Persyst that will always show you all the input channels in a recording, whether there's 2 channels or 200 channels, you'll see them all there. So to do this, let's go ahead and save this montage. Now you can go from the drop down here, or we can go ahead and just right click. This opens up the full menu of montage operations. I'm going to select Save Montage, and we're going to call this SedLine Review. And the reason for that is I'm going to create a trending montage as well. But to start with, let's go ahead and create some bipolar pairs for this. You can certainly do this. We know what the reference, well, we don't know what the reference is. It's not stated. So we don't know where the reference is located. That's one reason not to use a referential amp reference montage, is if you don't know where the reference is placed. They're certainly good for technical reasons to find out if you have a contaminated montage and so forth. But let's go ahead and add some bipolar pairs to this as well. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to do Edit Montage. And right now we're showing a 1010 stamp. That's what's selected here. We're going to select all, because if I select 1020, of course they're all still in dark gray there. We're not able to see any active channels, but if we go all, these ones are listed. And again, because they're not standard 1020 or 1010 labels. And we see the list here. Now let's go ahead and add some channels. So these are the referential channels that are there. I'm going to select the bipolar operation. I'm going to do FP1 to F7, FP2 to F8. So I've added a couple of bipolar channels here. And there they are. So, and we'll use this for trending because we're going to trend this pair of channels and this pair of channels, but these are still available to view. If you didn't want to have those seen, we could just highlight these and we could delete them. But we're going to do that in a moment. So now that I've got this done, I'm going to save this montage because I made some changes. I'm going to save that. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this again, but I'm going to give it a new name. I'm going to call it Trend. And the reason for that is just as a matter of convention, we like to have trending montages that don't get modified, because if we delete or change the input trends channels, that can change the trends as well, which makes sense. So let's go ahead and just save that as SedLine Trend. Now these montages are not part of montage favorites. They don't show up in this list, but we do see them in other montages. This is the full list of those. And I have this selected. Now if I wanted to add this to the favorites, I could certainly go to montage groups. I could go down to these and I could set the group as favorites and they'll show up there. So you can add or remove, you can create montage groups, things like that. Right, so now I have my trend group, and since I'm not going to be trending these individually, again I don't know where the reference is placed, so it's sort of an unknown montage. I'm going to delete these selected channels. So we'll just go to this option here, and now I've got my 2 channels here. I've got L1, L2. Now if I wanted to, I could relabel this. Even though the channel label is L1, FP1, L2, F7, I could just put FP1 to F7 as the label. So I've changed the label even though the input is the same. And I'm going to relabel this just for clarity, FP2 to F8. And that way they're not clipped off either with the long channel name. So this will be my trending montage. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now let's modify the trend template. Let's split the screen, and I'm going to load an existing trend preference that I have for a 2-channel MMX. And where this is located, if we go to the C drive, program data, which is a hidden folder. If you don't have hidden folder shown, you can just type in program data, all one word, and it'll take you into this folder. And this is where Persyst likes to save things. And I've got a 2-channel setline MMX already set up, but I haven't finished modifying it yet. And there's the trend template description up at the top. What that does is it puts it up at the top here so I can see which trend template I have loaded. Now, since I used this with the previous 2-channel recording, I've got these labels here, but I've got a red exclamation point. So these are not showing up because these channels don't exist in the recording. So how do I fix that? I just click this and I select my channel pairs. Easy as that. And these are just some example trends that you can do. There's any number of trends that you can apply to this sort of thing and create a new trend panel. We're going to do that. And I'm going to send this one by email as appropriate too. So FP1, F7, F4, or FP2, F8. So what this will do is look at the spectral edge frequency. If we click the edge tab here, it's going to look at where does 95% of the power fall from 0 to 20 hertz, and it gives us a frequency value. So one of the numerous trends you can do. So if I were to select add and new trend, this is the research package. So we have a superset of trends here. Persyst 14 Research is a superset of the clinical packages that gives you additional trends. We're not going to be using any of the research package items, but we will use, and I'll point out that we don't have to go into modify trend template to save these. So that's an important distinction, and I'll show both ways of doing that. So let's close that for now. This is our first trend setup, and I'm going to save this, trend preferences, and I'm going to save this, change, save, OK. Now in the clinical package, things are a little different because you will sometimes make trend template changes for all recordings, or you may make patient-specific trend modifications. And so in the clinical packages, when you make a trend change, it assumes that you want to do it for that recording for that patient. You may want to add a trend for a particular pair of channels that are involved in a seizure focus and highlight that. There's any number of changes you may make for a particular patient, including, well, any number of things. We won't get too far off in the weeds on that. But in the research package, it's not uncommon to be making changes to trend templates for any type of recording. So that's why we have these save and save as options available in the research package. So how do you change this in the clinical package? Well, use the modify template mode. That's available here as well. And what modify template does is it opens up an editing instance of Persyst. And that's the way you're most commonly going to do that. So just to review, preferences, modify template, and I'm going to pick this 2-channel setline and open this. You'll see it opens a separate window for Persyst, and it will be in the editing mode. There's no modify template showing up from the preferences here. Let me go ahead and make this full screen, split the screen, and we have what I saved last. So if you're running advanced review instead of research, you want to use that modify template mode. And again, it just opens up a editing instance of Persyst. That's the only difference. Everything else we're going to do is pretty much the same. I'm going to close those other windows. We're not using those. And we have our spectral edge panel. Let's add a new one. So I'm going to select duplicate panel. That way I don't have to start from scratch. I can just duplicate this. And I'm going to rename this panel. And I'm going to add some versus baseline trends. And we'll talk about what those are in a moment. So I'll put this baseline FFT. And I'll keep the amplitude integrated EEG as well. So let's remove these spectral edge trends. And to do that, I'm just clicking on the gray control bar, and then the shift key, I can highlight both of these, and I'm going to delete these. It only deletes them from this panel. And I'm going to add some versus baseline trends and describe what they are here in just a moment. So to do that, I'm going to select the add button, new trend, and I'm going to pick versus baseline. Now in the research one, we do include additional ones versus control and value. Not in the clinical one. In the clinical one, we use versus baseline end value. What's the end value? These will be three-dimensional versus baseline trends for spectrograms, whereas versus baseline is for two-dimensional trends. For instance, heart rate, if you wanted to get statistical changes from that, or another single value trend that's just two-dimensional, that would be versus baseline. This is for spectrogram. So I'm going to create trends, and we'll see what this is doing in a moment. Now, when I select this, what I want to do is set these to the parameters we use for scalp EEG, typically based on the default FFT parameters. I'm going to set this to 24 seconds, and I'm going to have the epoch length not be the default. I'm going to set this to 8 seconds. That's what we do in the clinical product, and we'll get into that in a moment, but it's taking a 24-second epoch and moving it forward 8 seconds at a time. So we get good time resolution, but we also have enough epochs to calculate an empirical null and use that appropriately. We'll see what that's going to do in a moment. Click OK. Oh, please select the trend. Absolutely need to select the trend. We're going to pick this one, and then I'll replicate it in a moment. So we've got a long stretch of characters here. I'm going to change the name of this just to shorten it up a bit. VS baseline. And the reason for doing that, you can apply a custom name. So I've given it a shorter name. This is the trend that it's operating on, and this is the range of frequencies, not really the one I want to use with the scientific notation. I'm going to drag these down a bit, and we can see that 20 hertz there. This one will be the lower limit, so let's go 0 to 20 hertz. Great. And -4 to 4, let's actually bump that out to 6 standard deviations. Okay. So this one's set up. Let's replicate it. Right-click, replicate trend, and I'm going to apply this to the right spectrogram. Okay. And I'm going to rename it. Instead of the long label there, I'm just going to do VS baseline. Okay, now those are configured. I'll leave this as my default trend for now. Preferences, trend preferences, save. Okay. Now you can create additional trend panels and add additional trends. If we click new trend, all sorts of things you can add. For instance, you can add envelope trends. You could add any sort of thing for 2 channels. What we're not adding, importantly, are the trends for seizure and spike detection, because with 2 channels, we don't have enough channels to do that. So I'm just going to click cancel. I'm going to save my work here. Make sure I've saved what I've done. Okay. Go ahead and close this. It'll ask me again, do I want to save that? Thank you very much. Now I go to Preferences, Trend Preferences. I'm going to open that one that I just saved, because this one still has a previous one in memory. 2-channel setline, open. And now we see my new trend panel here versus baseline FFT. Let's go ahead and process this. And there it goes. So now we're calculating spectrograms and EEG for this particular recording. Now the versus baseline trends are blank. It's not going to set an automatic baseline in this case, and that's okay. We're going to set one manually. The automatic baseline is set with 1020 recordings, where it can look at is there sufficient electrode quality? Well, we're not doing electrode quality because we have a subset of channels. And we're not going to do chewing artifact or look for seizures. Those are all things that the automatic baseline will use to determine a good place to set that. We're going to go ahead and just pick, I suppose, this initial part of the record, which looks like it has some artifact, but this will give us a good idea of what's happening. And when I set a baseline, it calculates an empirical null from whatever the values are in that range, and then it'll give me normalized z-scores here. So I'll go baseline, new baseline, 360 seconds. That's a pretty stable area. Add baseline, and I'm just going to call this B1 for baseline 1. Okay, and now these populate. So what are we seeing down here? These are z-scores. So this is our empirical null, and if we have less of something, we see increasingly green, more of something we see increasingly red. And as we can see here, the amplitude and this other activity decreases, as we go over to this side, so of course that turns green, and at what frequencies. If we right-click, show values, we get the maximum z-score frequency. So this says the maximum z-score where I've clicked here is minus 6.65 at 4.51 hertz. Just another way that you can analyze the data. And these, of course, just show the values at wherever I click. 7.3. This shows the maximum amplitude and frequency using the FFT. Well, that being said, there's other things you can do with this. I'll just mention that. If you wanted to export values, you can certainly do that. You can highlight trends, put it on the full screen. You can insert a range if you didn't want to do the entire recording. So the ones that are highlighted, and I right-clicked, insert a range, I can go to Tools and export channel trend values, and this will write a CSV table of values there. What are some other trends that might be of interest for this? Let's add a panel, and we're going to call this power, band power. This one's blank. Let me go ahead and get rid of this range. It's a blank trend panel that I've created. If you wanted to do band power, for instance, we'll click Add, New Trend, and I'm going to pick FFT power. So I go down to the frequency part of this, FFT power, create trend. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select FP1, F7 as my first channel. The FFT engine is shown in this particular one. Spectrum, let's do theta power. We'll do 4 hertz to 8 hertz. And for the graph, we're going to do a bar graph, and we're going to fill it. We'll make it blue. Why not? And we'll go ahead and set this 0 to 20 microvolts. Click OK. And now we've got FFT power for this, 48 hertz, FP1, F7. I want to create one for the other channel. Right-click, replicate trend, FP2, F8. Now I've got theta power for left and right channels. This is the sort of thing that you can do with Persyst 14 and 2-channel recordings. So even though you can't do spike detection and seizure detection with 2 channels directly in the trends, you can certainly create all sorts of trends for 2-channel data. Again, this is Michael Guest, VP of Research and Clinical Applications for Persyst. Any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you.